Hell Dam Construction. Mifune, Yujiro's movie Kurobe no Taiyo. The first question many people may have been why the Kurobe Dam was being built. I'm ashamed to say I'm one of them. In order to answer this question, we can't understand it without looking back at history. So let's take a quick look back. As you all know, from Japan's invasion of Manchuria to the China-Japanese War, 1931 to 1945, Japan imitated the West and sought to expand its influence by occupying Southeast Asia. After the invasion of China, the United States judged that there was a risk that China, which had been trying to control the United States in the future, might come under Japanese control, so it fought against Japan. This is part of the Pacific War. In the meantime, as a strategy to win the war, since Japan could not make weapons or anything due to lack of electricity, they planned to build a new dam on the Kurobe River and forced labor under military orders. It was called Kurobe 3 Dam. However, the entire bedrock of the upper track of this dam has a high temperature of over 100 degrees Celsius, and when they tried to drill a hole and set dynamite, it exploded before it could be ignited. More than 300 people lost their lives in the line of duty, including those killed in avalanches and falls from horizontal walkways less than 1 meter wide on cliffs. In the movie, Uno Jukichi quickly puts dynamite into the bedrock, and if he doesn't light it quickly, it will explode on its own, and as a countermeasure, he had to keep spraying water with a hose. However, in order for Japan to win the war, a domestic power supply was absolutely necessary, so the Kurobe 3 Dam had no choice but to be built. Workers were forced to do semi-forced labor under military orders. There was a scene where he reminisced that if hell really existed, this construction was hell itself. This is referring to the construction of Kurobe 3 Dam between 1940 and the start of the Pacific War, and in the same flashback scene of Kurobe 3H Dam, there is a scene where Genzo Tatsumi Yutaro beats a naked laborer with a stick and forces him to work for unlimited hours. The first dam construction was to supply electricity to win the war, but the purpose of the Kurobe 4 dam construction in this movie was to supply electricity to the entire Kansai region. After the war, severe power shortages in the Kansai region caused delays in reconstruction, chronic rolling Kurobeads, and numerous fatal accidents, which became a serious social problem. As a decisive breakthrough, Kansai Electric Power could find no other option than to generate hydroelectric power in the Kurobe Valley, which had been blocked by the harsh nature and had failed many times since the Taisho era. At that time, dam construction was carried out in this unexplored area, where it was difficult and life-threatening for people to even set foot on it. Photo of workers walking with luggage on top of a cliff called a horizontal walkway with a width of less than 1 meter. Regarding the plan, Mr. Itagaki, the president of Kansai Electric Power Company at the time, decided that Kurobe is the only option. We can meet the electricity consumption of the Kansai region at once, and the construction period is 7 years, and if it is delayed, Kansai Electric Power will go bankrupt. The project cost 51.3 billion yen. This amount was 5 times the capital of Kansai Electric Power Company at the time, and the number of people involved in the construction was 10 million. Even if we draw on the experience of the Kurobe 3 Dam, which was built for the war, 171 people lost their lives due to industrial accidents during the construction period. The construction of the Kurobe 3 dams had such a dark history, but did the construction of the Kurobe 4 dams make full use of this history? If you haven't seen the movie yet, please try to predict at this point what kind of reaction the workers had towards the construction of the tunnel for this dam. Predict whether things will go in a good direction or whether there will be problems. This movie is a blockbuster produced by Toshiro Mifune at Mifune Productions and Youjiro Ishihara at Ishihara Productions. All of the leading figures in the theater world appear in this production, and no matter how few lines they have in their supporting roles, they give soulful performances. The director is Kei Kume, who does a wonderful job of creating a well-balanced production, not only balancing the two big stars, but also providing some kind of highlight for the gorgeous cast. This was a time when computer graphics didn't even exist. So the actors actually visited Kurobe, and the inside of the tunnel was recreated on a huge set, and because it was a live performance inside, there were scenes that someone almost lost their life. The movie begins from here, taking into consideration the fact that the construction of a dam has such a long history. On August 1st, 1956, Kansai Electric Power Company began construction of its fourth power plant upstream of the Kurobe River. The project begins with tunnel construction to transport materials. The left side of the red line in the photo is the Amachi route, and the right side is towards Tateyama, divided into the first ward, Amachi route, leader Kitagawa and Hazama group, and the third ward Tateyama route, leader Takashi and Kumagai group. They will work on the Kurobe 4 dam construction with the company's fortunes at stake under the general direction of President Itagaki Kunikida. Takashi Kato of the Hazamagumi and Genso, Tatsumi Yutaro of a subcontractor of the Kumagegumi both visit Kitagawa Toshiro Mifune, the site manager, to work out plans for the dam construction. Genso's son Takashi, Youjiro Ishihara rebels against Genso, willing to make any sacrifice to dig a tunnel, and leaves home to work as a design engineer at Kyoto University, creating a drawing. Kunikida calls Takashi in Kyoto to meet Genso and Takashi, and invites Takashi to Kitagawa's house, having lied that Takashi's father, Genso, is about to die. When Takashi arrives at Kitagawa's house, Genso is filled with excitement and tells everyone sitting there about his life. I'm a man who was born to dig tunnels, and even if I get blown away with dynamite, that's what I want to do, and I say crazy words. He was very enthusiastic and gave a great performance, making me feel like he was a scary person. On the other hand, Takashi, an intellectual who is in direct opposition to his father's way of thinking, says, "My father is a man who is digging a tunnel for himself and doesn't care if people die. He thinks of people as little more than insects. It's such a shame to think that father's blood is in my veins. And, although we don't know how far the fracture zone extends, we are definitely going to hit it, so we should absolutely stop digging holes here, which is the biggest danger of digging a tunnel, and the attitude that denies the construction of the dam itself. A fracture zone is a stratum, where the bedrock has been fractured and has many gaps. It is softer than normal ground and contains underground water. The reason why the bedrock actually broke during construction and water and small rocks poured out all at once was because the fracture zone was destroyed with dynamite. Therefore, if the fracture zone breaks during an earthquake, it can lead to a major disaster. It is said that this fracture zone exists in the central part of the Japan archipelago, and when we actually dug a hole, we found it to be true. His father, Genso, can't stand Takashi, who has completely opposite ideas, and has an attitude that he can't help but treat him with shit. This conflict continues, but it is not just a parent-child fight, because it touches the lives of many people. For those of you who haven't seen the movie yet, or those who have seen it at least once, what do you think about the huge difference in opinion between these two people? And which one do you agree with? At the YouTube promenade, I heard Youjiro Ishihara, who plays Takashi, say in a postscript, "I've already died once, and I thought, I'm definitely going to do this tunnel construction. I thought I shouldn't have done it. I will explain later that he was once dead, but the fracture zone broke, and small rocks and a large amount of water entered the tunnel at once, and Mr. Ishihara was swept away by the water, and he himself was in the water, because he fainted. Workers immediately rescued Mr. Ishihara and saved his life, but he really was on the verge of death. How should we interpret this fate, in which the person who said in his role that the project should be stopped was in the greatest danger? I can't answer the question of how to replace electricity, that is, how to create other electricity, but what the scientists said happened. This is an anecdote, but Ishihara was the first actor to say he wanted to make this movie a success, and Ishihara was the one who asked Mifune if he would like to work with Ishihara. It seems that Mr. Mifune immediately responded that he would do it. In the movie, Takashi Ishihara is the one who denies this construction, and Kitagawa Mifune is the one who ultimately approves. And what I want to know is, not just as an actor, but as a human being, whether you were in favor of or against this project, whether it was during the filming of this movie or at any time after the filming. I would like to know. That's it. I understand that the two of them worked together and endured hardships to complete the project. But which one? Do you agree or disagree? And please tell me the reason. I agreed with Youjiro Ishihara's opinion from the beginning. This is because the results are based on scientists' soil surveys and judgments based on history. If you are in favor of this, people will ask you what you are going to do about the electricity shortage in the Kansai region. But I am not a scientist or anything, so I cannot answer that right now. That's because I have no knowledge on how to generate electricity, and times are very different between then and now. It will take some time to elaborate on this, so I'll leave it at that. But the opinions for and against will continue even after the fracture zone in this movie collapses. As a result of the completion of this dam, a large amount of electricity was generated and life became more convenient. But over 300 people died during the war during construction, and 171 people died in the line of duty this time. When you weigh the lives of these people and the completion of the dam, which do you think is more important? That is why human judgment is of paramount importance. I asked my wife if she was in favor of building this dam, and wife replied that it was done with it, so it was fine. My opinion is as follows. The idea that it's over because it's over is an opinion that ignores history and truth. By looking back at history, the next move will come out, so we need to clarify whether it is good or bad. This project was based on the same idea as the Imphal operation and the Battle of Iwo Jima in the Pacific War, and I felt strongly that it was a crazy challenge. Is this something that should be praised, or is giving up something that should be praised? What is your opinion? In September, a month after the construction work started, Takashi met Yuki Kashiyama at Tateyama Mountains for leisure, and they grew closer to each other, and the conversation they had at that time was very memorable. Yuki asks Takashi she wonder what her father would do if there were casualties due to the fracture zone, and keep asking Takashi how father decided to prepare. The root cause of this conversation was that Takashi visited Mr. Kitagawa's house and criticized his father's work methods, emphasizing that the fracture zone was the biggest bottleneck. This conversation was actually the biggest hurdle during the filming of this movie and during the actual construction. And the conversation continues when Takashi, who met Kitagawa, goes to meet Genzo. Takashi suggests to Genzo that this time, let's make it clear that things are Kurobe and white. My father is not a human being. He is a murderer who pursues honor and concubines and sacrifices anyone, even him. How did he get his brother to fill a bedrock with dynamite and detonate it? Why didn't he do it himself? He tried to put me on the scene after my brother. So my mother took me and ran away to Kyoto. He says what he wants to say is that it's thanks to his older brother and the workers that his father is able to look great now. Genzo runs away and says that everyone was in the room at that time, but he lies. Takashi objects, saying that you did it because no one else would want to do it if they were humans. Genzo, to win the war, isn't it natural to die for your country? Takashi lies again, yells. And that's what I wanted you to say, and you finally said it. Maybe he means the line about dying for your country. Genzo slaps Takashi. When Takashi says that it's a star, he throws an object and hits Takashi in the face again. Takashi says yes, that's your true nature, but Mr. Kitagawa says stop it. I yell at you to stop. At the same time, Genzo's workers stop his violence and leave from there. The two go outside and Mr. Kitagawa speaks. Kurobe 3 was a military order and a battle. It's essentially different from the current Kurobe 4. Kurobe 4 is a real construction work in Japan. What happened today is completely personal to you and completely different, isn't it? Takashi, personal? That's not it. It's definitely not something different. Does it matter now that you are responsible for what you committed in the past? Kitagawa, this construction also costs 40 billion yen and the lives of 10 million people. Please think about this. You will hit a fracture zone. However, if an accident occurs, it is the victim's family who mourns. If this tunnel does not pass, the entire Kurobe 4 dam will be extinct. How many people end up on the streets? Takashi, you will definitely hit the fracture zone. As you said, we keep safety first when it comes to construction. However, if you look at it from the other side, isn't it the same as when an accident occurs and there are victims? Kitagawa, we are prepared for the fracture zone, but there are no casualties. Takashi, Kurobe 3 is for war. It's for peace in the east. Saying this, Japanese army pointed a bayonet at the laborer. What on earth are you talking about for this time? Is it for peace again? Is it for power? This is worse than my father beating a laborer to death with a bamboo stick for the sake of Japan's prosperity. Takashi used words like prosperity and convenience to persuade many people, and when an accident occurred, electric company and politics wanted to say that they were wrong and ran away without saying sorry. This is exactly the same as the aftermath of the radioactive leak from a nuclear power plant during the Great East Japan earthquake in 2011. There was no one to take responsibility. It was a complete escape. That's why we always talked about fracture zones from the beginning. Kitagawa, Takashi, to be frank, we are no longer in your father's era. It's easy of you to blame your father. However, from now on, we must open up the next era. That's more important. I can't remember all the people who would have died in hell if we do not do that. Takashi, Mr. Kitagawa, is that your true intention? Kitagawa, I'm serious. Takashi, is there a place for me to stay? Takashi asks the worker. He said he didn't know if it would be winter or spring. Takashi came to see the view of Kurobe, but he has now decided to go through the tunnel with Kitagawa. Now, everyone, the conversation between the two is not just a conversation to buy time, but it is an important scene that clearly states the difference in the way the two think, so I have included it. Mifune says that the back 3 reason is for war, and the Kurobe 4 reason is for electricity for the general public, but he is aware that if the shatter zone ruptures, there is a high possibility that people will die. He said that he will continue to build dams. The reason for this is that he feels sorry for the victims. Coincidentally, this opinion is echoed by Toshiro Mifune, who plays Army General Korechika Anami, who happens to be almost the main character in the movie Japan's Longest Day. He agreed with the opinion that war should be continued. Everyone feels sorry for those who died in the past, but how long will the war continue? Will they continue until no one is left? The same goes for the construction of the Kurobe 4 Dam. I am of the opinion that if there are accidents on the way, we should stop. Which one will you choose? Now, this is not the actual movie, but with the full cooperation of Kumagegumi, who actually dug the tunnel. The Kansai Electric Power Tunnel was recreated on the factory grounds in Toyokawa City, Aichi Prefecture, as shown in the photo. We would like to introduce an accident that occurred at the location used for the actual filming. What kind of accident was it? This is because the fracture zone has ruptured, and small rocks and large amounts of water are flowing down from the ceiling and walls of the tunnel, where the rocks were supported by metal and wood. This is a scene where they are being swallowed by a stream of water. Therefore, in order to avoid duplication with the actual movie, please note that the part where the fracture zone was torn will be omitted from the explanation of the movie. The content of this accident was excerpted from a book written by director Keikume Shinchosha, with the theme of Mifune and Youjiro, but this text is a quote from YouTube with the theme of Promenade. The tunnel for filming, built on the spacious grounds of the factory, is 210 meters in total including the main shaft and pickup tunnel, a 40-meter open set at the small end, a pilot tunnel, and a large amount of water that is blown out by breaking the break in the fracture zone. A large water tank was built to store water inside the tunnel, which is 7 meters wide and 5 meters high. The ground was covered with granite gravel, and large equipment such as conway shovels, trolleys, and jumbo trucks were brought into the tunnel. Inside the tunnel, rails and equipment of all sizes glow dimly, and at the end of the tunnel is a granite cutout. The 150 iron plates that support the walls are so finely textured and stained that they are indistinguishable from real walls. In this way, we were able to realistically recreate the Kansai Electric Tunnel as it was back then on the main campus. See photo. In such an environment, filming will begin on September 1st. Then, on September 30th, in the second half of scene 95, the climax scene of the first part, where Kiriha finally splits and crumbles, a huge amount of rock collapses, and waterfall-like spring water cuts through the dam and gushes out, will begin. From here, we will take pictures of the large flood scene in the fracture zone. 25 tons of water is released per second from a water tank containing 420 tons of water, and in order to reproduce the water gushing out in an actual tunnel, it is mixed with sheer worthless rocks, minerals, etc. that are carried away with ore from the mine pit. It has a structure that mixes soft granite called earth and sand. If we calculate that a small truck can carry 1 ton, the amount and speed of 25 tons of water per second would have been unimaginable, since it is said that even a 30 centimeters tsunami can cause a person to be swept away without being able to stand. One can imagine that this is not a tsunami, but rather that the entire human body is lightly submerged underwater, unable to breathe and simply washed away. So what happened? The play in scene 95 begins with Mifune ordering everyone to evacuate as Kiriha is in danger of collapsing. However, Tatsumi Yutaro, who opposed this, get into a scuffle, and Mifune, Youjiro, and the 3 miners have no choice but to try to evacuate while holding Tatsumi's limbs and body. The next moment, the Kiriha collapsed, and a large amount of water and shear spouted out, and everyone fled through the torrent. The above was shot according to the script, but this scene had to be carefully prepared and rehearsed many times because there was absolutely no room for failure. The reason why failure is not an option is that if the water is not successfully executed as per the script, the inside of the tunnel will be flooded, and if you have to start over, you will have to get the water and rocks out again. Then, an unexpected accident befalls the staff. Unfortunately, it turned out just as I had imagined. What happened to them? The gate of the aquarium is opened, and the sound of water rushing between Kiriha and the aquarium can be heard. Then they heard the sound of a slip being dropped. However, at the same time, the Kiriha that was supposed to break did not budge. The cast and director must have been worried that what had happened was that the rim would break and water and debris would come pouring out. Mifune predicted that if it wasn't flowing, it meant that the outlet was clogged and a large amount of water would come rushing out at once due to the pressure of the water, and he said, "This is huge." At that moment, boom, 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 the Kiriha split and shattered, and a huge amount of water gushed out. The 5 members of the Ishihara family, carrying Mifune, fled at once. This is because the saddle, which are made up of dozens of trees arranged in a cross-shaped structure, 2 square pieces of wood are stacked one on top of the other, raise water level, and when they float up, they instantly break apart and fall on everyone. This is because the water spouted out from a narrow space all at once and was subjected to abnormal pressure, causing too much water to come out all at once. Mifune ran safely past the director while looking back, but Ishihara and his friends were too late to escape and were swallowed up by the water in the blink of an eye. However, Ishihara must have been used to the water from his experience at sea, and was leaning forward and desperately trying to look up. Nakai and others jumped into the rescue from the right, followed by the workers. The water swirled like a giant creature, approaching the front of the camera, and the assistants and director were all blown away in an instant. Director Kume wrote that they were blown away rather than washed away. It looks like a log hit the director's lower back. As you can see, it was a photo shoot in which there was a high risk of loss of life. Although the director and actors tried to create the scene faithful to the original work and convey a sense of realism to the audience, it can be said that they were not aware of the control of the water flow. Director Kume started hearing voices calling the 2 of them, Mifune-san and Yu Cha-an. People around them didn't know where they went. The entrance to the tunnel was opened, allowing light from outside to enter. After about a minute, the water began to recede and the light returned as Mr. Katajiri yelled at me to turn on the lights. Mifune was unhurt, but Ishihara seemed to have bruises all over his body, so he was taken by ambulance and taken to a municipal hospital where the director and several other people were there to be examined. Ishihara had hit him in the lower back and limbs, but there did not appear to be any broken bones. Looking back on the accident at the time, Ishihara says, "I died once. I lost consciousness during a shooting accident, during the scene where the sun rises in Kurobe, and I don't know for how many minutes or seconds, but I was definitely dead during that time. A large amount of water, 420 tons, were released in less than 10 seconds into a tunnel with no escape. It happened in an instant, and neither I nor the staff had time to escape. The moment I thought I lost consciousness, it was like that. So when I came back to my senses, I was prepared to let some of the staff members die. Fortunately, everyone survived, but 40 to 50 people were taken to the hospital. I was the one with the worst injury. A shooting cord called a cat tire was wrapped around my body like a snake. The moment I got tangled, I passed out and drank a lot of water. When I needed surgery and was put on the operating table, I asked the surgeon to give me a cigarette because I loved smoking. When I took off my gritty work gloves and tried to smoke a cigarette between my fingers, my right thumb was missing. My thumb was bent backwards. In my memory, I tried to catch myself on a wood rail while being swept away and passed out. He recalled that his finger must have been broken at that time. His 10 fingertips had been crushed by crushed stone placed under the rail, and all of his fingerprints were gone. He was also severely bruised on the thigh, and he still has a large scar. However, the director said it was a miracle that all the staff survived and he wanted to thank God. Mr. Ishihara was apparently 32 years old at the time and was running a production company, so if he had lost his life here, his fans would have been saddened by his premature death. However, this may be God's salvation. It can be said that God did not allow a huge star who was extremely popular as an actor and singer to die young. I didn't know anything about this accident, but Mr. Ishihara's luck is not only that he was born with this talent, but that God has placed his destiny so that he will continue to develop his talent for the benefit of his fans. I can only assume that God made it for him. The above is too graphic to be called an anecdote, but Mifune, Ishihara, the director, and other workers who experienced life-threatening accidents share their hardships and courageous words during filming. I could hear it. The film begins with Ishihara being first approached and consulting with Mr. Mifune. The 6-company agreement. 6 companies, Shochiku, Taho, Shintaho, Daiei, Nikatsu, and Toei agree not to borrow land or poach stars, including the issue of how to select directors and actors, and whether or not to make a movie. The movie had problems from the start, and even when filming began, it ended up with accidents like this one. It was a project that resulted in the death of 171 people who were not only involved in the filming, but also those who were actually involved in the construction of this dam. Thanks to the hard work of the workers who overcame these many obstacles, the architects, and the directors and actors involved in making the film. This film is the result of overcoming hardships that cannot be experienced in other films. It was. This concludes the accident case. The same situation as just described will be restored as a movie story. The movie continues from here. On May 1st, the sturdy beams and steel frames were destroyed, making a grinding sound. After that, the fracture zone breaks. When the fracture zone breaks, the rocks within the bedrock break into small pieces, and the strata, rocks, soil, and spring water that have accumulated a large amount of groundwater form a waterfall that instantly makes a gurgling sound along with the broken timbers, filling the inside of the tunnel. That's what happens. Gradually, the timbers supporting the bedrock of the ceiling began to break more violently, and the thuds continued uninterrupted. Kitagawa loudly orders everyone to evacuate. The longer this call is delayed, the more lives will be affected. However, Takashi's crazy father tells the workers not to run away, but Kitagawa stops. Father, the fact that the words "don't run away" come out at this time proves father is too crazy. The destruction of the fracture zone is the first scene of the film, and Youjiro, who plays Takashi, always said it was the biggest challenge. That's why he was against this project. Even those who supported the project had no idea that the mine would be filled with water, rocks, and sand. So they had no choice but to hold a new strategy meeting. But even at this meeting, more water was coming in, and things were only getting worse. This day marks the 50th anniversary since they hit the fracture zone. 1. Installation of water drain holes. 2. Restoration and reinforcement of Kiriha. 3. Assemble the trees and drill a hole to accurately measure how far the fracture zone continues. This leads to the conclusion that such measures are a way to eliminate everything that comes out of the fracture zone. Meanwhile, on Takashi's side of the third section, Tateyama's side, workers who were tackling the fracture zone are getting injured or dying one after another, and they are overcome with a sense of hopelessness and frustration over the lack of progress in the construction work. 150 workers quit after receiving false phone calls and telegrams from their families. Isn't it human nature to want to run away from the reality that the water pressure is getting stronger and the amount of water is increasing? Kitagawa of the First Ward orders 3 shifts to 2 shifts, but Takashi objects, and Kitagawa negotiates. With Kumagegumi's managing director Youjiro Yanagi, Kitagawa asks how much money they will have to pay to escape the fracture zone. When the managing director says that there are many things that humans cannot do, and the same goes for cancer, Kitagawa is reminded of his second daughter, who is terminally ill. However, Kitagawa says that even cancer can be cured. What makes the impossible possible? He adds that this is impossible because you do not believe in the human soul or mind. It seems that he was trying to convince himself that his second daughter, Makiko, would be cured of her illness. Kitagawa refuses to budge, asking him to dig even just a millimeter. So Kumagegumi continues with the work. The fracture zone that Takashi mentioned at the beginning is the bottleneck here as well. It is impossible to change the structure of nature. After that, the president of Kansai Electric Power Company, which was working on this project, began rubbing his head on the tatami mat and asked Kumagegumi's managing director for a favor. Immediately after the defeat, the president reported that he had lost his eldest son and daughter in succession. In Kurobe 4, it doesn't matter what we lose, and it doesn't matter how much money we spend. We want to succeed. Therefore, a shield, a barrier that protects the human body and objects from surrounding dangers and influences. When President told Director that he wanted Director to implement this from December, the Director replied that he would do it no matter what. The same thing happened even if Kitagawa's request came true. I thought that this persuasive power was the soul that Kitagawa spoke of. As you can see in the photo, they spent a lot of money to increase the number of drain holes to 10. Instead of having only 3 drain holes equals extension distance of 2,900 meters, to a total of 124 lines, and concentrated on draining water. Instead of giving up, they put their money where their mouths were and stopped the water from flowing from the walls and ceiling. All the workers were the happiest here, but I think it was Kitagawa. He assured Kumagegumi that he could do it and tried to convince Kumagegumi's managing director, and his strong belief moved the president and moved Kumagegumi's managing director. The water comes out from a place where the bedrock is weakened, but after repeatedly hardening the bedrock and overflowing, the spring water finally stopped. Finally, the bedrock that marks the end of the fracture zone has appeared. If this did not stop, the fracture zone would continue and we would have no choice but to repeat the same thing over and over again. What happened? At this point, I've come to believe that God won't bring good results right away, but if I continue to apply my utmost wisdom, He will help me. Because of this fracture zone, only 80 meters of progress was made in 7 months. Without the fracture zone, the excavation could have been completed in 6 days. It's a little over 1 meter per day, but I can only feel that I did a good job when I got this far. If you move forward 20 meters from here, the sun of Kurobe will be shining brightly on the other side of the tunnel. Kitagawa suggests that they take a break for about 3 hours, but Takashi remains alone and continues drilling holes in the bedrock with the chisel machine. On the other side of the bedrock is Kunikita, Takashi Kato from the Hazama group. He noticed the sound of a rock drill, and when he listened closely, he realized that someone was drilling a hole, and finally the tip of the rock drill broke through the rock and appeared right in front of Kunikita. Now I finally understand the meaning of the movie's title. The value of Kurobe Sun was created by the concentration of everyone's lives. Finally, use dynamite to break through the bedrock to widen the passage. After the smoke cleared, workers from both sides ran towards us while shouting. The beauty of group work and the joy of accomplishing something as a group can be felt from each and every worker. Everyone is drinking celebratory sake in their helmets. Not only were they happy, but they must have felt a sense of happiness that reached heaven. However, while praying for the completion of Kurobe 4, Kitagawa receives a telegram informing him that Makiko Tomoehiro has passed away. Kitagawa is asked to give a toast even though he is in tears. I thought everyone was crying from the joy of being penetrated, but Kitagawa did a great job holding back tears. He said that each of yours never give up spirit has made it possible for you to reach this point. Meanwhile, Takashi's father, Genzo, dies while having a dream, while telling his eldest son, who died in a spontaneous dynamite explosion on his father's orders, to escape. He felt responsible for his son's death. When construction began in 1956, it was said that for every 10,000 kilowatts produced in electric power development, one person would die. The fact that 171 people died in the construction work of the Kurobe Dam, which produced 250,000 kilowatts at the time of its completion, shows the difficulty of constructing the dam in the unexplored Kurobe Valley, where at the time it was a risk for people's lives to even go there. At the time, it was said that there were no injuries to Kurobe at the dam construction site in Kurobe Gorge. However, the meaning of this phrase does not mean that there are no occupational accidents in construction, but rather that if you fall, you will not be injured, and a mistake in construction could mean instant death. Was there ever a place in the world where it was so difficult to build a dam? This is the last scene of the movie. Gyukichi Uno and his wife come to the completed Kurobe Dam and look at it thoughtfully. Kitagawa then rides the tour bus through the tunnel, gets off the bus at a landmark called the Fracture Zone, and continues through the tunnel to reach Kurobe Dam. Mifune fought with all his heart and soul at the beginning of the Shatter Zone, and together with his son-in-law Youjiro, he stands at the top of Kurobe Dam. I'm sure Kitagawa is thinking about things like this. When the filming of this movie had calmed down a bit, Mr. Mifune left a wonderful impression as follows. Humans are mysterious creatures. Sometimes, a violent, indescribable passion suddenly fills my whole body, and I can't control it with my rational mind. Although he was well aware that if he surrendered to his passion, only hardship and hardship would await him, he continued to push forward with a certain will. This is exactly what Kitagawa did as a character. Many tourists go home surprised when they see the depth of the water and the huge dam, but for Kitagawa and Takashi, as well as Mifune and Youjiro, they saw the dam on the sheer cliff that helped them overcome the greatest hardships in their lives. Both of them will never forget it for the rest of their life. Thank you very much for your hard work. And finally, thanks so much.